Dollar?
No, I don't want any.
Hey, miss, you got the time?
I don't know.
You got $1?
No, I don't want any.
So the setup, like a lot of deliberate attacks, we were multiple attackers. Matt and I were in cahoot on this, and I was looking for an easy target. So the first thing that said you missed was me, actually.
Yeah, walking down the road, not paying attention to surroundings. I was on my phone. I clearly didn't see him when I was walking on the path.
I start out by approaching her kind of innocuously and kind of check her reaction to identify her as a good victim.
Some of the pre-assault cues, when he came off of the tree, he started looking around to see if anybody was there to notice if maybe somebody would intervene. He definitely had like a look of, he's tried to corner me, like stop me from walking down the path, asked what the time was to get me to engage with him. And then very clearly from there, it's assault. In that situation, when I finally realized that this is a person who means to do me harm, I put my hands up to create a fence between me and the attacker. I try to move offline, ideally to get back down the path, but in this case, he was blocking my attempts to move around him.
So the first thing that I did as an attacker was I tried to grab her wrist to get control of her.
And to break out of this attack, the weakest points on his grip are the space between his thumbs. And so since his two arms are much bigger than my one arm, I am going to grab my own fist and break out from that opening in his thumbs. If I try to go a different direction, I'm going to have a much harder time because he has very clearly there's no gap here. Whereas even though his hands are much, much larger than my arm, the thumbs are pretty weak and pulling them up will allow me to break free.
From there, I went to a collar tie. This is a typical kind of attack from like a wrestler or somebody that's a lot larger than their victim.
And in this case, he's trying to control me. So I want to strike and do what I can to make space. So very close range strikes, body shots, and knees. Ideally, I want to throw as few shots to make him let go so that I can then run away.
In this case, she stalled and I was able to recover fast enough to get her into a headlock,
which is an even worse position for me. And from here, I start striking to grab the eyes, the groin, and I bring him back to ideally drop him to the ground to then make an escape. So after I make my escape from the headlock, I successfully run away from the first attacker, but then there's the second attacker who I didn't see when I initially walked down the path.
The first thing I do is I show I have a weapon. In that case, I'm carrying a knife.
And for strategy, in this case, he hasn't started attacking with the knife. It's just a threat. And so I attempt a push kick to create as much distance between him and I. From here, I am not engaging in close. I want to keep my distance. But he sees it coming and moves back.
Yep. And then eventually from there, it's takedown territory. I lunge in and grab Sydney and just throw her down on the floor.
And in this case, at this point, he's made contact with me and he's starting to throw me, and the best that I can do in this situation is prepare and brace for a fall break on the ground. I don't want to hit my head on the back of the ground. In this case, we were on the grass, so the impact would have been less, but if we were on the path, my head hitting the asphalt would have been it for the fight for me. So he was in mount. I wanted to get him off of me, and so because he had his hands on my throat, the first threat to my person is the risk of getting choked. And so I break one of his hands off and I buck and roll him off, at which point I throw some strikes to his groin to make sure that he's going to have a harder time following me. I escape and then I sprint away. I do feel the techniques work. The great part about Krav Maga and self-defense in general is that it is tailored so that most people, almost everybody, can employ these techniques. None of the techniques that I did today required me to be bigger than either of my opponents. Clearly, Matt is a lot bigger and stronger than I am. And with Krav, it is a striking-based system. Like clearly, with the collar tie, if he has the collar tie, he's going to be able to control me. If I start striking him, it changes the dynamic of the situation. We both train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu together, but in this situation where it's purely self-defense, when he had the collar tie, even though in a BJJ environment I might know other things to do, like having control of him, in this situation I don't want to be attached to him, and so the focus is on striking and getting away safely.
You'd have been in big trouble if Matt and I got
Mm-hmm.
on top of you at the same time.
Yeah, like that's actually a good point. If I had stayed engaged with Matt, this person with the knife coming up to me, he could have stabbed me with the knife. It would have been a much different situation if I had decided to stay and fight. With self-defense, you can train a ton, but things will go wrong. And so like, despite having a lot of training, I need to be prepared for this didn't work. It's not gonna go perfectly every time. The mindset is, I wanna get home at the end of the day. I don't know what their intentions for me were, and I'm going to just fight like hell to get out of there.
We know very much about the bystander effect and the fact that people just will not come and help. It's the reality of aggressions. A lot of people will be around, filming, watching. Very, very few people will come to your aid. So you have to be able to take ownership of your defense.
And I guess the last point would be, if I had been paying attention walking down the path, if I had seen him and an equally scary looking person down the
More
way,
scary.
I might have turned around and gone a different way, and the whole situation could have been avoided. So situational awareness is the number one thing that we teach at Krav, is the most important first line of defense in any self-defense.